On the broadcast tonight, some students who made it out of the April's ferry disaster alive take the stand at the trial of 15 crew members who fled the vessel, leaving behind more than 300 passengers to sink with the ship. Korea's finance minister expects both the government and the central bank to seek expansionary measures to bolster the economy at least until next year. And the U.S. Security Council calls for an immediate and unconditional humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza to allow for urgent aid to reach civilians. Early edition begins now.
I see trees of green, red
늘 남편 먼저,
I see them
늘 자식 먼저.
for me and
레이디 퍼스트라는 말을 믿고 살아온 당신. 오늘만큼은 세상 누구보다 당신이 먼저입니다.
한 분 한 분 특별하게 모시겠습니다.
Excellence in Flight, Korean Air.
It is 5 a.m. in New York, 10 in Algiers, and 6 p.m. on Monday, the 28th of July here. Live from Seoul, I'm Moon Gonyo.
And I'm Daniel Chen. Thank you for joining us. Korea's finance minister is once again calling for aggressive expansionary policy to revive the sluggish economy.
Right, he was speaking at an event with a journalist today. Choi Kyung-hwan said the expansionary measures were needed now and would likely extend beyond this year. Well, they echo previous comments he has made since taking office less than 2 weeks ago.
Choi added that the government and the Bank of Korea are on the same page in their assessments of the current economic situation. There is growing speculation that the central bank will lower its interest rate next month for the first time in more than a year.
And in what has become a popular refrain in recent days, the benchmark Kospi has set yet another record high.
Nowhere but up. The nation's benchmark index broke the 2,050 mark in midday trading, picking right up where it left off last Friday.
Arirang News' Kim Ji-yeon tells us what's behind this latest market rally.
Monday was another record-breaking day for the nation's benchmark index. After surpassing the 2,050 at one point in midday trading, the Kospi settled in at 2,048 points, picking up its biggest gains in nearly 8 months. Kang Yeon-chul, an analyst at Seoul-based Uri Investment and Securities, says exports played a big part in the rise.
Exports this year have reached all-time highs, and company performance has also improved compared to last year. Exports to the U.S. and Europe steadily rose, and exports to China are expected to rise during the July and August period this year.
Kang Yeon-gi, an analyst at Seoul-based IM Investment and Securities, attributes the bulk of the rise to low market interest rates. 4 major commercial banks in Korea recently lowered interest rates by 0.2 percentage points to 1%.
When we look at the types of industries leading the gains, they're related to electricity and communications, which benefit from low rates.
The two analysts also say the impact of economic plans laid out by the country's new finance minister may have played a role in the record-breaking gains. Last Thursday, the nation's new economic team, led by Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan, unveiled a $40 billion stimulus plan to spur growth by inducing spending and promoting corporate activity. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Well, prosecutors are seeking arrest warrants for Yoo Dae-gyun, the eldest son of Yoo Byung-hun, whose family controlled the Cheonghaejin Marine Company, which operated the doomed Seoul ferry, as well as his aide. The 44-year-old son was arrested last Friday along with 34-year-old Park Soo-kyung, who allegedly helped him evade capture. Both had been on the police's wanted list since the sinking of the ferry back in April that killed more than 300 people. Now, prosecutors are also questioning a woman who provided a studio apartment in Yongin where Yoo and Park were holed up. They have also summoned Yoo's driver and another man who accompanied Yoo and Park when they first moved to the studio apartment in late April. The Incheon prosecutor's office wants to detain Yoo Dae-gyun for questioning on charges that he embezzled about $9.6 million from Cheonghaejin Marine and its affiliates. 6 surviving students of April's Seoul ferry disaster were in court on Monday, providing testimony in the trial against the ferry's crew. The students said many more would have survived that fateful morning if the crew and the Coast Guard had taken appropriate measures. Our Yudian reports.
A ferry with about 300 passengers, most of them students, is sinking fast. But instead of staging full-out rescue efforts, their crew members are nowhere to be seen, and the Coast Guard is watching from afar. This was the testimony given by 6 survivors of April's Seoul ferry disaster, who are students of Danwon High School. Speaking in a court hearing Monday afternoon, the 6 gave a chronological account of the event from the time of the accident. One said that about 30 students were lined up for the emergency exit, but when the rescue team didn't arrive, each student began jumping into the water. As soon as she did, the student says in a shaky voice that the wave suddenly crashed up against the emergency exit where 10 of her friends had been waiting. They were unable to escape. Another surviving student also said that the Seoul crew were nowhere to be seen for the entirety of her escape. She testified that the Coast Guard was within an arm's reach of the emergency exit, but only lifted out the people who fell into the water. She said she told them a lot more of her friends were just inside the emergency exit, but the Coast Guard only watched as the ship continued to list. Most students told judges that there were repeated announcements instructing passengers to stay where they were. If they had received instructions to escape, the 6 students said many more could have survived. The students ended their testimonies by asking the panel of judges to punish the crewmen to the strictest letter of the law. Seoul ferry captain Lee Jun-seok and 3 of his fellow crew are currently on trial for charges of homicide by willful negligence. None were present at Monday's court hearing. Yurian, Arirang News.
Now, Koreans will head to the polls on Wednesday to cast their ballots in the nation's largest ever by-elections. With the clock ticking, candidates from the ruling and opposition parties are doing all that they can to get their message across and connect with voters. Our political correspondent Ji Myung-gil has more from the campaign trail.
The July 30th polls carry extra weight because 15 parliamentary seats are up for grabs, the largest total ever for a by-election. The stakes are perhaps greatest in this Seoul and Suwon constituencies, which are considered strategically important as barometers of public sentiment. Candidates of the ruling Saenuri Party have made economic recovery their main platform. They've been touting their party's connection to President Park Geun-hye and promising reforms.
There are 2 choices in this election. Elect our candidates who will bring about economic development for their electoral regions, or their candidates who are mired in collusive practices and old politics.
The main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy has also gone on the offensive, deeming the by-election a chance to prompt change.
We must provide a warning to the ruling Saenuri Party in the presidential office so that the government brings about changes.
The main opposition party has been hammering on the government's failure to arrest Yoo Byung-on, the de facto owner of the Seoul ferry, which sunk in April, killing 304 people. To make them more competitive in races against their conservative rivals, the opposition recently unified campaigns in specific constituencies behind one candidate. The by-election comes less than 2 months after local elections in June, which neither the ruling nor the main opposition party claimed victory. Ji Myung-gil, Arirang News.
Now, contrary to recent comments by a former U.S. intelligence chief, South Korea's defense ministry says North Korea does not appear to have the technology to develop electromagnetic pulse bombs. Now, in a regular briefing today, Defense Ministry spokesman Kim Min-seok said that the so-called EMP bombs require advanced skills and that it doesn't appear Pyongyang has secured that relevant technology. Well, not yet, at least. An EMP bomb is made to detonate high in the atmosphere and release electromagnetic pulses that can damage electronic devices and communication networks on the ground. Just last week, James Woolsey, former director of the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency, said that Russia helped North Korea develop the weapons back in 2004.
A high-level U.S. official is due in Korea this week. Purpose of visit to seek support for Washington's sanctions on Russia and Iran. Peter Harrell, the U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary of State in charge of sanctions, is scheduled to meet with Korean officials on Tuesday. He's expected to stress that the international community should work in unison to punish Russia. Moscow has been assisting pro-Russian separatists in eastern Ukraine who have been accused of downing Malaysian Airlines Flight 17 earlier this month. Analysts say this situation puts Seoul in a tough spot. On the one hand, South Korea is a loyal U.S. ally, but Seoul also needs Moscow's help to deal with the threats posed by North Korea. The U.S. official will also bring his South Korean counterparts up to speed on international negotiations, which aims to curb Iran's nuclear development program. The talks were recently extended by 4 months until November. It's been a week and a half since Malaysian Airlines Flight 17 was shot out of the sky, but officials are still trying to gain full access to the crash site in eastern Ukraine. Their progress has been hindered by the pro-Russian rebels blamed for the incident. As our Shin Se-min reports, while the international community is weighing in its options, a military mission appears to be off the table.
Achieving military superiority through an international mission in this area is, according to our conclusion, not realistic, not even if we have a massive military buildup.
Prime Minister Mark Rutte says the idea of sending international troops to the crash site in rebel-controlled Ukraine is not just unrealistic, but also too risky. While he said all options were on the table, military intervention is apparently not one of them, over fears that the development would only stand to broaden the conflict.
The area is under control of the separatists, consisting of many heavy armed soldiers at a short distance from the Russian border.
They're the same separatists who stand accused of shooting down Flight 17 with nearly 300 people on board. While an earlier deal between Malaysian authorities and the rebels laid the groundwork for an investigation into the disaster, obstructions remain. A team of unarmed Dutch and Australian officers were forced to drop plans to visit the crash site on Sunday due to heavy shelling in the area. More than 200 bodies of the 298 victims in the crash have been recovered. Officials believe the others remain in the plane's wreckage. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Moving on to other parts of our world, the 3 weeks of fresh violence in Gaza shows no signs of letting up, with both Hamas and Israel firing on each other despite ceasefire proclamations. The UN Security Council has wrapped up an emergency meeting on the growing crisis and called on all parties to lay down their weapons. Our Connie Lee has the details.
The UN Security Council has called for an immediate and unconditional humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza to allow for the delivery of urgently needed assistance. The statement comes after an emergency meeting early Monday as military operations resumed in the Gaza Strip despite calls for a truce. Israeli tanks and soldiers are still positioned along the Israeli-Gaza border as talks over a temporary ceasefire broke down. The 24-hour humanitarian truce proposed by Hamas early Sunday to mark the end of the Islamic Ramadan holiday was over by the afternoon, with both sides exchanging fire. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu questioned the validity of the Hamas truce and said his country was not going to let a terrorist organization decide when it's convenient to fire at our cities, at our people, and when it's not. International pressure is on for both parties to resolve the conflict. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry and UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon spent last week in the Middle East seeking a peaceful end to the violence. U.S. President Barack Obama also spoke with Netanyahu by phone, calling for an immediate ceasefire. Since the conflict flared up on July 8th, more than 1,000 Palestinians have been killed, mostly civilians, including many women and children. It's a scene of massive destruction, as piles of rubble and debris are seen all around the Gaza Strip, as the conflict shows no sign of letting up. Connie Lee, Arirang News.
Digging deeper, getting to the bottom of stories that impact your life. Talking with you on air and online. connecting you with experts on the world's most pressing issues. News and current affairs at its best with Moon Gon-young and Daniel Che on Early Edition at 6.
Moving right along, mainland China is flowing with money that's seeking an investment haven. With a slowing domestic real estate market there, Chinese firms flush with cash are going overseas company shopping. And Korea is no exception when it comes to China's aggressive merger and acquisition moves, as our Song Ji-sun reports.
Chinese companies are busy buying up overseas companies with their huge cash reserves. According to Bloomberg on Monday, Chinese firms spent some $44 billion on global merger and acquisition deals this year, up nearly 40% from a year earlier. Chinese investors have traditionally invested in the domestic real estate market, but with profits eroding amid slowing growth, many are turning to foreign firms for higher gains. And Korea, a close neighbor and home to many advanced IT technologies, is one of the major go-to places for China's investors. Chinese corporate mergers and acquisitions of Korean firms have jumped 27-fold to $661 million this year compared to the same period last year. So what's behind the spike? Well, it's mainly because Asia's biggest internet company, China's Tencent, spent some $500 million buying a 28% share in Korea's CJ Games as it looks to bolster its lineup of online and mobile entertainment. China's IT giants like Tencent, along with Alibaba and Baidu, are fiercely investing in Korean game developers to acquire the skills to invent hit mobile games. On the other hand, Korean firms' investment in Chinese firms through M&A stands at a mere $20 million this year, 1/5 of the volume recorded last year. This is raising concerns Korean firms may lose their own shares while the Chinese aggressively acquire Korean stakes. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
And back here in Seoul, despite government efforts to promote innovative enterprises, many Korean startups are ma-impostors. According to Global Entrepreneurship Monitor 2013, they accounted for 37% of all startups in Korea last year. Global Entrepreneurship Monitor is an annual global study conducted by a consortium of universities, and that's the highest percentage among the 26 countries on which the study was conducted. And it's quite a contrast to countries like Norway and Switzerland, where the proportion is less than 8%. To diversify the startup landscape, industry experts say the government needs to offer a wider range of programs for aspiring entrepreneurs across all age groups so that they can, in turn, create businesses that add value to the economy. Well, life is about to get a little easier for foreigners in Korea who would like to shop online but found it difficult and tedious to deal with. Financial authorities said Monday that they would be introducing alternative online payment systems that will make things a bit easier. They previously removed an authentication system that limited purchases by foreigners in May, but many businesses continued using it because of safety concerns. In response, the Science Ministry and Financial Services Commission will do away with a 300,000 won or $290 limit on purchases and allow for multiple payment technologies. It's part of the government's deregulation drive aimed at boosting the economy. The changes could go into effect as soon as early next month.
And that shopping can be made on mobile devices too. So it's really hard nowadays to imagine life without those smart devices. And perhaps it's in line with that trend. The number of smartphone users around the world is expected to reach 2.5 billion by the end of next year.
And probably it goes nowhere but up. U.S.-based market researcher Strategy Analytics says about 35% of the global population of approximately 7.2 billion will use smartphones in 2015.
Now that means more than 3 in every 10 people will be smartphone users. Industry watchers say the rapid increase in user number can be attributed to the expansion of markets in developing nations where low-end smartphones are being released.
And according to the market research firm, the number of global users had surpassed 1 billion back in 2012.
Well, we are at the height of the summer vacation season here in Korea, where it's a time when millions of Koreans take a few days off to recharge their batteries. And of course, President Park Geun-hye is no exception. She is also taking a week's vacation, although her vacation destination will not be anywhere else but the presidential office of Cheongwade.
There's a lot of responsibilities that comes with the job. Officials say she will have a very quiet vacation, considering the country is still mourning the victims of April's ferry disaster, and tens of the passengers to this day remain unaccounted for. The president is expected to continue working on ways to revitalize the economy and also decide on who to nominate for the vacant culture minister post.
Well, you know, we all need breaks, and I hope she does get her share of getting some relaxation, friends. But on the culture front, a special photo exhibit about Korea's easternmost island of Dokdo opens this Monday.
It's the work of a celebrated photographer, Kim Jung-man, who's made the island his subject every season over the last 2 years. Here's our Park Ji-won with more.
From its breathtaking sunrises and the East Sea that surrounds it, to flocks of seagulls and the moon hovering above the horizon, this photo exhibition shows the many faces of Dokdo that may be foreign to those who haven't had the pleasure of visiting. Korea's celebrated photographer Kim Jung-man visited Korea's easternmost territory several times over the course of 2 years to capture the beauty of the island day and night at every season.
It is a great honor for a Korean photographer to be able to shoot the very place that represents the Korean spirit. This beautiful and sometimes lonely place has inherited various artistic meanings as well, with some literary and historical connotations.
Kim shot more than 20,000 photos, but settled on 55 works that depict the mysterious and humble island. All the photos will be donated to the Northeast Asian History Foundation, which first came up with the idea of the Dokdo exhibition.
People can now freely visit Dokdo, but they usually don't stay long enough to appreciate the diversity of the island. We'd like to show audiences various beautiful images of the islets.
The foundation hopes the exhibition helps to counter Japan's false claims to the island, an island that is not only Korean land, but also part of the Korean spirit. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
You know, I thought we were getting a little bit of a break from the summer heat, last weekend, but this Monday we're off to another very hot week. Let's go over to our Michelle Park for an update on the weather forecast. Michelle, it seems like it's only getting hotter out there.
Yes, temperatures have gone up compared to yesterday, and today is Chungbok here in Korea, which is supposed to be one of the hottest days of the year.
And usually people go for samgyetang for nourishment. Well, I guess hotter days are expected to come, right?
That's right. The monsoon period is nearly an end, so expect temperatures to really heat up soon, but the rain isn't letting up just yet. The southern regions and Jeju Island have rain in the forecast until tomorrow afternoon, and this monsoonal front will move northwards, bringing rain to the central region on Wednesday. Now, however, tomorrow we can expect some similar conditions to today, with sizzling hot temperatures into the 30s for most regions. And the places where there is rain, well, we can expect them to stop by the afternoon, making a way up its bright, sunny day. Now, going over to our tomorrow's readings, Seoul will start off the Tuesday morning at 22 and reach up to 33 in the afternoon. Meanwhile, the southern cities such as Daegu and Busan will peak up to 32 and 29 degrees. Now moving over to other regions, Jeju Island tops over to 30, while Dokdo and Mangungang both tops to the 27. Well, that's all for now. I'm Michelle Park, and back to you guys.
Thank you for that, Michelle. And that brings us to the end of our newscast. Thank you for watching. For our viewers in Korea, try to have a cool and relaxing evening. This has been Daniel Che.
And I'm Moon Ganyang. To those of you in other parts of the world, have a great start to your day. And we hope to see you right back here, same time tomorrow. Bye-bye.